my mouth and the meditation of each and every one of our hearts here today will please God, who is our rock. Amen. For the last several weeks, we've been looking at James, and James has been talking about trials. James has shared with us that we all should expect trials, and it's something normal that all people in life will face at one time or another, usually at multiple points. He's talked about how we overcome these trials, what sorts of actions can we take, and he talked about what attitude we should bring to trials. He's talked about the product of these trials in our lives as we overcome them. So James has been talking about these trials and these tests and these challenging times in life. This week, James turns and starts to talk about a deeper, darker subject. He's going to talk about what happens when we fail the trials. What happens when we don't pass the test? What happens when we yield to temptation? James says in James 1:13 that yielding to temptation gives birth to death. Yielding to temptation gives birth to death. This is strange sort of imagery, giving birth, birthing death. But listen in James 1:13 and following, as he writes, "Let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted by evil, and he himself does not tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when he is carried away and enticed by his own lust. And then, when lust has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and when sin is accomplished, it brings forth death." Yielding to temptation results in lust, he says, or sinful desires, which, when it conceives, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it grows up, grows into death. Yielding to temptation gives birth to death. You've heard that old saying that a thought, plant a thought, right? You've heard this. Plant a thought, harvest an action, or a word, right? A word or action. Plant an action, plant actions. Harvest habits. Plant habits, harvest character, and plant character, harvest the destiny. Right? If we start to think about things from a certain way, it starts to guide our actions. If we perceive things in a certain way, we will act in a certain way. And when we act in a certain way, repeatedly, that develops habits. And those habits, over the course of a lifetime, over the course of many years, develop into our character. It becomes our character. We are what we do. We become what we do. And these character traits ultimately determine our destiny. That's sort of what James is saying here. If you allow your thoughts to wander into the areas of selfishness and sinfulness and immorality, if we focus on these things and allow our minds to dwell in these areas, ultimately what will happen is we will become that which we think of. We will become sinful, immoral creatures. Jesus also suggests this in his Sermon on the Mount when he takes and elevates the requirements for righteousness. He says that the 10 Commandments teach us, "Thou shalt not murder." Jesus says, "But I tell you, even if you think hatefully and speak hatefully to another person, you've already committed murder in your heart." Right? So if you think about it, it's as bad as doing it. The 10 Commandments say if you commit adultery, then, that's punishable. That's immoral. Jesus says, "But I tell you, if you look at a woman with lust in your heart, your mind, already committed adultery." It's as bad to think about it as it is to do it. James is saying a sort of similar thing. Jesus is saying that if you think it, it's basically equal to doing it. James is saying if you think it, you will probably do it in the long run. So both are strong warnings for us to avoid sinful thoughts, to not entertain them, to not allow them in our minds to reside there and stay there. I think today in our society, people sort of minimize the impact of entertaining sinful thoughts. You say, it doesn't matter too much what you think. It's just really about what you do. Take lust, for example. A lot of people in our society think it's normal and healthy for guys to lust after women. Perhaps you've heard one of the following sayings. Maybe you've said them yourself. How about this saying? Boys will be boys. Right? Boys will be boys. He's just acting like a boy. Louisa May Alcott, in her novel Little Women, writes this: boys will be boys. Young men must sow their wild oats. Right? Even back then, she was saying, boys will be boys. They're going to act this way. Now, she wasn't advocating for that, but this mentality was around even back then. Or maybe you've heard the saying, he's just red-blooded. I looked that up online to see exactly what that means. He's feisty, or active, or lusty, or pursuing sexual gain. So he's just a red-blooded American boy. Almost said in pride, right? He's chasing skirts. He's just a normal guy. He's a red-blooded guy. How can you fault him for that? I've heard guys say this, even to me. They'll say, well, you can look, but what? Right? See, I knew you'd do this. Look, but don't touch. Insinuating that it's okay to let your eyes wander as long as you keep your hands, to yourself. But that's a lie. It's wrong. And it's a sin. This is a sin that our society and that Satan has planted in our society and that our society has bought and believed. And, I'm sad to say, many people in the church have bought into and believed. We are called by Christ not only to keep our hands to ourselves, but also to keep our eyes to ourselves, gentlemen. Paul reminds us and calls us to take every thought captive for Christ Jesus. You can't tell me that letting your eyes wander is not captivating those thoughts for Christ. You can't tell me that those thoughts honor Christ as you see the woman walking by and allow your gaze to fix on her and to focus on her. Paul also warns us to avoid every hint of immorality. This, my friends, is a hint of immorality, maybe just a touch more. Woo! God broke the mold when He created her. Right? That is much more than a hint. And Paul says, avoid even the hint of immorality. This is sin. This thought, our thought life, can be sin if we allow it to. Now, guys, lest I get all sorts of emails, angry phone calls, and scratches on my car, let air out of my tires, women, this goes for you too. Put away your tawdry romance novels. Don't just put them away, burn them. Or maybe you don't have problems with that. Maybe those, the Fabio sort of books don't really catch your attention. But maybe your problem is with gossip. You've got to share the news. You've got to share the weekly update with your friends. Gossip, ladies, is every bit as much a sin as lust. You can try to excuse it by saying something like, I just needed to vent to my friend about my other friend and what she was doing. I just needed to get it off my chest to help me get over it. You can use lies like that, just like guys can use lies like God created a beautiful creature and boys will be boys. You can use lies like that, but it doesn't matter. It is still every bit as much wrong and every bit as much a sin as a guy Googling a girl. When you talk badly about your friends behind your back, you may use an excuse like this, but it's true. Right? But it's true. I don't care. It doesn't matter. If you're talking bad about somebody behind their back, is that honoring to Christ? What does Matthew 18 tell us? Go to that person if they've done something wrong to you and speak to them. Don't speak to your friend, and don't talk to your other friend and your other friend and your other friend just to get it off your chest, and don't have them go and spread it to their friends so that they can all gang up on this one poor soul and get her back. No, talk to them. Go to them. and share with them the problem. Because when you allow these thoughts into your mind, whether they be lust or gossip or anything along these lines, anything that's a sinful thought, if you do it in action, it is sinful in thought. So don't entertain these thoughts. Don't allow them to come into your mind and stay there. We've all got things that pop into our head now and again, but the whole idea is pop it back out. It pops in, pop it back out. Train yourself to pop it back out. Toying with these thoughts and allowing these thoughts about sinful actions will stay, if they stay in our head, will develop sinful habits. They'll develop into sinful actions, they'll develop into sinful habits, and James warns us that these sinful habits will result in death. It's serious. This is serious. I couldn't help but just think about the Wonder Pets. Does anybody here know what the Wonder Pets are? Some people, right? Tamsin and Marilla were watching this sometime. Marilla really likes it right now. But there's a little guinea pig on there, and he always says on every episode, there's an animal in trouble, and he says, "Is he serious?" The dolphins call it the net. "Is he serious?" The baby deer can't find his salt lick. "Is he serious?" But friends, this is serious, right? This isn't serious. This is serious. Because sinful habits, sinful thoughts in your mind will develop into sinful actions, will develop into sinful habits, will develop into sinful character, will reap your destiny, will determine your destiny. So, get them out of your mind. Satan wants you to believe that they are harmless. That is a lie from Satan. Satan wants you not only to believe they're harmless, he will tell you that they're harmless, he will also try to make them attractive and alluring. He will say, these thoughts are what you want. Not only are the thoughts, but the actions behind them are what you want. Satan is a master fisherman. He's a master angler. He knows just what bait to use to put that hook in front of you and attract your attention. James uses a fishing analogy in verse 15, and it's Satan that's behind that fishing rod. He wants us to bite. He dangles that bait in front of us, and he says, doesn't that look good? Wouldn't that be nice? And all sorts of bait Satan can use. He uses all sorts of things. He makes it look harmless, he makes it look enjoyable, he makes it look tasty, and he makes it look righteous. People should really be aware of this. I've got to let people know. The church leadership isn't letting people know about this. I've got to make sure that everybody knows about this. Who should I tell first? People need to know the church leadership isn't doing their job. So I'll call this person and see what she thinks. Should we tell other people about this? How should we get this news out, right? It makes it look righteous. He makes it look righteous. Sometimes we just baptize what we're doing in Bible language so that it's this Christ-like language when in actuality it's a Satan-like action. So you lose your temper at somebody and you call it holy, righteous anger. It doesn't make it holy and it doesn't make it righteous. When a guy sees a woman and he says, man, God created a beautiful creature when he made her, doesn't make your Googling righteous. Right? You're not praising God for his craftsmanship. Right? That's not what's going on here. Satan tries to trick us in all sorts of ways, making it look attractive and making it look even right when he couches things in biblical language. Remember, isn't that what he did to Jesus? When he was trying to tempt him in the wilderness? And he said, throw yourself down from this temple. And doesn't the Bible say that God will command his angels to take charge of you and protect you? That you won't even dash your foot on the stone. He tries to couch these temptations in biblical language. And friends, too often Christians have fallen for it. Christ didn't fall for it. We cannot afford to fall for temptations, even when they're couched in biblical sounding language. Satan just twists it and makes it look so attractive. But what happens? What happens to a fisherman when the fish